Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Meirc webinar on the principles for building innovation in the public sector. My name is Mohammed Nayal. I'm a senior consultant at Meirc, and I am excited to share with you today takeaways from my years of experience working as an advisor with public sector entities in the region, where I help them develop strategies in different areas. Over the next 30 minutes, I will go over a number of slides, after which I will open the floor for your questions. As we go through the presentation, however, please feel free to type your questions into the chat window located at the bottom of your screen as I go along. We will capture your input and try to answer all of your questions at the end of these slides. So let us test the chat screen right now and see if it works. Can you type in yes to the chat screen if you can hear me clearly? Please type in yes. All right, Mahroof, yes. Here. Okay, yes. All right, excellent. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope you will find this webinar informative and interesting. So let us start with the first slide. So just a quick summary of my background. I started my education in engineering and transitioned over the years into strategy, where I worked in consulting with McKinsey. My assignments included projects such as education reform in Bahrain and economic investment policies in Saudi Arabia. After working in the private sector, I spent about 7 years working in the governments of Dubai and Abu Dhabi on innovation, technology, and strategy, including working as an advisor in the executive office of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, where I was involved in various projects. A public sector innovation is an area that I am passionate about, and I hope to share that passion with you in the next slides. Today's agenda will focus on the following. First, I will give a brief overview of public sector innovation, what it is, and the obstacles facing governments when it comes to innovation. Next, I will give a few examples of innovative policies from around the world. Then I will talk about some principles that can be applied to build innovation in the public sector. Now, all of this should take us about 30 minutes, and I will then answer your questions. So let's start out with a survey. Now, every year, the Global Innovation Index ranks about 180 countries by their capacity for and success in innovation. Now, the index is published by Cornell University, INSEAD, and the World Intellectual Property Organization. So I have a list here of 6 countries. Which one do you think is ranked highest in innovation? So don't type in your answer yet. Let me actually open up the survey and then select your answer from this survey. So go ahead and select your answer. Which of these countries do you think is the most innovative? All right, so we have people answering Japan. Anyone else? All right, so let's see. So we had one answer at Japan. Now let's see if that's the correct result. And the correct result is actually Switzerland. So Switzerland is the correct answer. Now, what do you think goes into the index? 7 key parameters go into the index. Institutions, human capital and research, infrastructure, market sophistication, business sophistication, knowledge, technology outputs, really many things go into there. But if you go into details, things like the quality of universities, amount of research funding, patents, articles published. Now, one thing that I would ask you, so if we're operating in the region, but places like the United Arab Emirates, for example, where do you think, type in where you think that the UAE ranks on the innovation index. So go ahead, just put in a number. All right, 75. So not that close. The actual answer is 47. So the UAE ranks 47 on this list. Now, there are different things that, like we said, that go into this innovation index. But one of the things that is actually quite important is how innovative the public sector is. So let's start out with defining innovation. Now, basically, innovation is the generation and application of new ideas. And typically, innovation in the public sector is much easier. Now, why is it much easier in the public sector? Because in the private sector, because in the private sector, the competitive drivers lead businesses to really value innovation. It's a means of creating improved products, better processes and services, and of course, that leads to increased profits. Now, although the public sector, the drivers are different, but in the public sector, more and more, the public sector is focusing on innovation as a means of improving performance and productivity. Now, one of the things that we need to be careful about is the innovation process in the public sector is different because the opportunities and risks are more challenging. So why is innovation in the public sector important? Public sector innovation matters for a number of key reasons. First of all, the size of the public sector. A public sector can be huge and make up a large percentage of GDP in many countries, especially in this region. Improved productivity and services can make a big difference to the overall economy. The second reason is that economies are evolving and the world is changing quickly, so the public sector needs to come up with new policies to match evolving economies. And the third reason is the public sector sets the rules of the game for private sector innovation. It can make innovation in the country overall easier, or it can make it quite harder. Now, for those people who are trying to innovate within the public sector, they face a number of barriers. First of all, not always do we find innovation champions or innovation leadership in the public sector. Reward and incentive systems sometimes don't support innovation. They actually support doing something that's safe. There are no budgets that are dedicated to innovation, and there's limited knowledge of how to innovate, what are the processes and methods. So is there a way to encourage innovation in the public sector? Now, the good news is that the answer is yes, which we will discuss in the next slides. Now, fortunately, there are many examples of successful innovation policies from many countries. I'll give you two successful examples, and then I will also give you one example of a failed new policy that actually made the problem even worse than it originally was. The first example I will give is a transportation problem in Brazil. In urban planning, the golden rule is that when a city's population hits 1 million, it's time to install a subway or a metro system. Now, when the city of Curitiba, Brazil, hit that point in the 1970s, it couldn't really afford a subway system. Now, how much do you think a subway system costs? Type your answers again, interactive. So type your answers into the box. How much do you think a subway system cost for about a city with about 1 million people? All right, 10 million USD. Are you sure? Do you want to change your answer? 100? All right, you're getting closer. Now, in Dubai, for example, Dubai built a metro system in the past few years. That cost $8 billion. 8 billion. Now, in Brazil, back in the 1970s, it's very close to the second number that you entered. It was around 300 million. But in the 1970s, 300 million for a city in Brazil was too much to pay. So what can the city do instead of digging inside the city and creating a metro? Now, what it did is it developed a bus system, but not just your regular bus system, something that was different. Different because it looked and felt like a metro or a subway system. The government policymakers actually got together and started thinking, what makes a subway or a metro system different? What makes it different? Well, it's fast because it has its own road and its own track. It comes on time. It comes frequently, every 50 minutes or so. So the question is, can you make a bus system that has the same qualities? Now, that's what the city of Cortiba did. It developed its own system called the Rapid Bus Transit, RBT, that has become a benchmark of smart urban rapid transport. Coritiba's bus system resembles a subway. It just looks like a subway. It has exclusive transit lanes, prepaid ticket counters, sensors that communicate with smart traffic lights, allowing buses to transport commuters quickly and efficiently. So people actually think after a while that they're using the metro. In addition, which is probably the most important thing, is it is as fast or even faster than the metro, typically because of its own tracks. So I'm going to point here and you can actually see how the entrance into the bus system looks. It very much looks like a metro system. Today, more than 2 million residents use the bus to commute to work. The system has buses that are powered by biofuels, so they actually use soybeans. Buses are able to transport 250 passengers at a time, and this has helped the city maintain the lowest levels of air pollution in all of Brazil. This system has been adopted in 83 cities worldwide, including Guangzhou, one of China's fastest growing cities, and famous cities such as Chicago. The second example I want to give you is from the region. Now, the simple act of renewing a driver's license can sometimes be quite difficult. Typically, you need to go to the Department of Transport or police to get an eye test. And in some places, the lines are long and the offices only open during weekdays from, let's say, 8 to 3, which is when people are working. So what is the solution? What would you do? The solution is to put eye testing centers where people usually are. And where do people go in places like Dubai? The mall, of course. In Dubai, you can go to major shops that sell glasses and take an eye test there. These shops are directly linked to the Road and Transport Authority. A few months ago, for example, I had to renew my driver's license and completed the test in 10 minutes. The shop printed a temporary driver's license, and in a few days, I received the real license by courier. It really was such a painless process that made it easier for me, the resident in Dubai, and made it much more efficient for the government. It's an example of a process where everyone wins. Any process that makes everybody wins is what you want out of innovation. Now, unfortunately, finding solutions to problems can only be successful when government policymakers actually think it through. Now, policy that actually had the opposite effect and made the problem worse. Now, it's important to recognize that innovation is more than just coming up with a good idea. It's actually translating that idea into a successful outcome. And that is where often the public sector fails. Now, a good example that makes this clearer is what is sometimes called the Cobra Effect. The term Cobra Effect comes from a story set at the time of British rule in India in the early 1900s. Now, the British government was concerned about the number of deadly cobra snakes and attacks in Delhi. So what would policymakers do to reduce the number of cobras in the city? So somebody came up with a great idea about offering a reward system for every cobra that was caught. So if you caught a cobra, you brought it to the government, dead or alive, then the government gave you a reward. Now, initially, this was a hugely successful strategy. Large number of snakes were killed. Everybody wanted to get the reward. However, after 6 months, cobra attacks started to increase. Now, why would they start increasing after actually decreasing for a while? So if you think about it, people are actually creative. Some people started thinking, this is an excellent way to make more money. So what they started to do was grow cobras in their houses, then kill them and take them to the government for the extra income. Now, of course, when the government became aware of this, they canceled the reward program and no more rewards were given. Well, canceling the reward actually led to even more problems. There were all these people who had these worthless cobras in their houses. So what did they do? They just set them free. And as a result, the wild cobra population further increased and attacks grew even more. So the apparent solution for this problem actually made the situation even worse. Now, this brings us to the section about what can be done to ensure that the right innovation is built into the public sector. Now, what I'm going to talk about is the 9 principles, and this is just a summary. So the principles begin with integrating innovation into a department's strategy, and it ends with sharing ideas with others. Now, between these steps are principles regarding hiring the right people and building the right innovation culture. So let's jump into principle number 1. This is the most important principle. It starts with integrating innovation into the strategy of a public sector department or entity. Strategic planning is a fundamental part of public sector operations. Innovation needs to be clearly included as part of this strategic effort. A strategy is a key enabler of innovation. It identifies the issues being faced now and those anticipated in the future. A range of tools can be used to assist strategy development. So, for example, the 3 horizons approach. The 3 horizons approach looks at issues being faced right now, first horizon, as well as those faced in the shorter and the longer term future, the other 2 horizons. So such strategic planning exercises can actually spur you into more innovation. And an agency strategy can also provide clarity on where innovation efforts should be focused and highlight where internal and external players can provide input to realize their best outcomes. So some examples of questions that can be asked during the strategic planning process are: what are the agency's key priorities and challenges? What opportunities do we have for innovation? And how can the need for innovation and the risk be communicated internally and externally? That's principle number 1. Now, principle number 2, it's all about people. This is absolutely essential in the innovation process. If a public sector entity wants to innovate, then it needs to seek out, recruit, and nurture people who are motivated to innovate, that have the relevant skills and capacities. Team diversity should also be considered, extremely important. Teams benefit from having a diversity of skills and experience. This is particularly true for teams trying to innovate. Innovation often depends on the ability to see things differently. Diversity in background, skills, experiences, and perspectives of the different team members is likely to boost innovation. If everybody thinks the same way, then it's very difficult to come up with a new idea. So it's important for teams to consider their composition on an ongoing basis to foster this diversity. This consideration is valuable when teams are managing the inevitable staff turnover that happens in any organization. But this presents an opportunity for people to hire members of work teams who can be interested in innovation. Principle number 3 is about getting ideas from stakeholders. Now, building an organization that wants to interact with partners, customers, and citizens is very important. You have to be able to ask people what they think, and you have to welcome advice from different segments and new ideas. But also you need to build a system that's able to capture all of these ideas. Because good ideas don't come from someone locking themselves in a room and coming up with this aha moment. Rather, new concepts developed slowly, and they come from the clash of different ideas. You might have half an idea, you might talk to somebody else who helps you build upon and enhance your innovation. That's principle number 3. Principle number 4 is about building organizational capacity. You need to be able to build expertise and experience in managing innovation in the public sector environment and work to identify and address any obstacles to innovation that might exist. So what are some of the elements? There are 3 broad elements of organizational capacity. This can be governance structure, people, and systems. So for example, development of instruments, methods, guidelines, manuals, systems, procedures, really anything that enable an organization to tap into the knowledge of different people. Principle number 5 is about making sure that there are areas and programs where innovation can be channeled and where experimentation is expected and where failures are regarded as legitimate. So these spaces should be explicitly identified as testing grounds for ideas that can be expected to go into implementation. Now, many of us have heard about the culture at Google that allows people to be creative, different rooms where ideas can be generated. But that doesn't mean you can only apply it in the private sector. So if you look at the picture over here, I have a picture from the UAE federal government of an innovation lab. And it's a great example of a forum where people can exchange and build upon ideas. Now, principle number 6 is about facilitating networking. This means building communities of practices and networks within and without the public sector to share experiences of innovation, build partnerships, and learn from others. So this also draws upon what we spoke about in previous slides, that great ideas don't come from one individual, but usually great ideas come from combining several ideas into a much better one. So for example, a team made up of public sector employees, business people, academics, and citizens can come up with a much better solution than just a team of policymakers sitting in a room and making assumptions. Principle number 7 is about building the right culture. Now, organizations that are inward-looking and are not comfortable with risk are far less likely to be innovative in either their work practices or their service delivery to clients and customers. But agencies with values that prioritize caring for employees, collaboration, delivering results, and achieving goals are both more innovative and higher performing. Now, what does building the right culture depend on? It depends on leadership. You need to inspire and encourage innovation. Engagement, you really need to engage the people in an organization and make innovation a normal part of day-to-day business. Collaboration, really genuine collaboration working together, for example, with community, industries, and academia, like I spoke about before. Principle number 8, about measurement and evaluation. You need to monitor the return on your innovation investment and evaluate the outcomes. Now, the public sector is not very good usually at documenting and learning from projects. And sometimes you can be working on a project in the public sector, and when it finishes, and after you've spent a lot of money and resources on it, you find out that a similar project was done last year with exactly the same result in a different department. So you need to document, measure, and evaluate, and make it known. And remember, if you don't measure it, you cannot manage it. The last principle is about sharing ideas. Teams can provide a positive example of innovation by promoting ideas and projects that have been involved with and by demonstrating what has been achieved. And it's also desirable to highlight what did not work so others can avoid the same pitfalls. Now, information on what was done, how the innovation happened, associated lessons could be applied more broadly to the work of the agency, and this should be shared. Innovations can be showcased through meetings, forums, online newsletters, worksite displays, or published articles, or really they can be promoted through communities. In this way, valuable experiences can be made available in other areas that face similar problems or challenges. So that's the end of our principles, and if you or anyone you know would like to learn more about this topic, then please consider signing up for our Public Sector Innovation and Smart Cities course that will be held in Dubai on October 2nd. This course is 5 days, and we will be going into much more detail on the innovation process in the public sector. We will also go into the concept of smart cities and how to make living places and public policies more creative, more innovative, and better for city residents. So just summarizing overall, we went through an overview of public sector innovation. We went through some examples of public sector innovation. We showed 2 examples that were successful and 1 example that was not so successful. And we spoke about the 9 principles for building innovation in the public sector. So we've come to the end of our webinar, and now I'd like to open it up for questions. If you have any questions, you can please type it into the chat box below. Well, no questions there. I'd like to thank you again for being in this webinar. I hope you found it useful, and I hope to see you in one of our courses at Meirc.
Meirc.com